reality, one God, one life, one way, one reality, one God, one life, one way, one reality, one God, one life, one way, one reality.
When he says that. Now, what he does say, by the way, toward the end of his little letter, and he wrote this, by the way, to the leaders of Christianity. He was actually addressing them. But, and I'm just going to read the last part of this, and then we want to actually go to look at what's going on within the first century and among this group. So he says,
laying the background, he
right.
was reaching out to the current Christian leaders of his time,
yes,
and help against another messianic group that was rising up, that was teaching incorrect things.
Exactly. So he wanted them to help them, and the Jewish people, Jewish community, actually, to put down this new messianic.
The Jewish and the Christian community.
Exactly.
To put down this new messianic group that was coming out.
He wanted to actually to help do this.
Yeah.
But I just want to read the last couple of paragraphs in this section, by the way. He says, if certain Christians who consider themselves scholars would understand this secret, who believe that they are commanded to abolish the Torah of Moses from the seed of Israel, they would not engage in such foolishness. The people listen to their self-conceived words, something which was never intended by the writers of the Gospels, quite the opposite. They have written clearly that they intended the contrary. But he goes on to say, because of these errant scholars, hatred has increased toward the Jews, who are blameless of any gift and proceed innocently to observe the Torah with all their hearts, endued with the fear of God. They should instead bring their people to love the ancient children of Israel, who remain loyal to their God, as indeed commanded to Christians by their original teachers. And I want to make this point. When he says original teachers, he's not talking about the teachers that exist today.
Right.
The original teachers would have been those original Jews that were involved in this Messianic movement in the first century.
Right, which we can actually name James, the brother of Jesus, as their leader.
Exactly.
And
among others,
the other groups that were there.
Right.
People of the groups.
And he goes on to say, he says, they even said to love one's enemies. How much more so to us? In other words, we're not your enemy, right? How much more so to us? In the name of heaven, we are your brothers. Right? One God has created us all. Why should they abuse us? Because we are joined to the commandments of God, to which we are tied with the ropes of His love. We do this not to enjoy the pleasures of the evil inclination and emptiness of a passing world, where truly we have become a byword among the nations, and with all this. And this is a quote from Psalm 44, by the way. But he says, in God we gloried all the day, and we give thanks unto thy name forever. We pray for the good of the entire world, especially for the benefit of those lands in which we reside, protecting us in our observance of the Torah. Listen to this last paragraph that he labors very pointedly toward the believing Christians at that time. He says, you members of the Christian faith, how good and pleasant it might be if you will observe that which was commanded to you by your first teachers. How wonderful is your share if you assist the Jews in the observance of their Torah. You will truly receive reward as if you had fulfilled it yourselves. For the one who helps others to observe is greater than one who observes, but does not help others to do so. Even though you only observe the 7 commandments, I have simply written in my pleasant work, Torah Hakina Ot, that the Jews who observe the Torah but don't support it is considered among the cursed, and the Gentiles who does not observe the 613 commandments but supports it is considered among the blessed. Now this is Jacob Emden, like I say, he's a sage in the 1500s, well recognized, and pretty much the Ashkenazic prayer book is attributed to Jacob Emden. So he's a well-known sage of Israel. But I want to bring us back to one last little point that he makes in this last paragraph. Right? And this is where we're going to go. He says, you members of the Christian faith, how good and pleasant it might be if you will observe that which was commanded to you by your first teachers.
Right.
By your first teachers.
Now, if you would address what he's referring to there.
Okay. Here's the question. What was Jacob Penman, Rabbi Emden actually referring to? What was he talking about? So, even though we look at the NT not really as a New Testament, but maybe like some kind of a historical document, at least within the Gospels and the Acts, we see this Messianic movement that's blooming, that's flowering, and then we see the charismatic leader being put to death, and either his body is stolen away or he's resurrected, something happens, but the movement doesn't die, it continues to live on. And eventually, after about 25 or 30 years, this Messianic movement is also reaching out to the non-Jews. In other words, for the first time, after 25 or 30 years, there's actually a mission to the non-Jews, which would be typical of a Messianic movement if they have an idea that their leader is the Messiah. Because of what we know from the prophets, there has to be an ingathering of Gentiles to the banner of the Mashiach. So if you're going to have a Messianic movement that stipulates that so-and-so is the Messiah, and he doesn't draw the non-Jewish world to him, I'm not talking about all the non-Jewish world, but a large part of the non-Jewish world, then he has kind of failed in some sense. Now I know that Rambam stipulates that the Messiah has to do, he has to be a direct descendant of King David. He has to keep both the oral and the written Torah. He will fight the wars of God. And if he's successful in that, then we might say, okay, well, then he's almost the Messiah. But then if he builds a temple, if he does, those things, then we can say truly he is the Messiah. But the prophets also allude to the fact that Messiah is going to be able to draw the non-Jewish world to him. As we quote in Isaiah, that the Gentiles will gravitate to the banner of the Mashiach. In Isaiah, he also talks about the temple being a house of prayer for all people, and he stipulates that God will bring others unto himself that's not of his people, Israel, that's the non-Jewish world. So there seems to be this activity from the non-Jewish world that is being drawn to this figure.
Well, not only that, but they're being drawn to the Torah.
Yes.
Not away from the Torah.
Not away from the Torah, exactly.
And that's something that needs to be really talked about, too.
And we want to bring that situation up. And we will with this, looking at this kind of using the not-so-New Testament as a historical document of what's going on with this Messianic group. You can read church historians, like Eusebius, for example, and you're going to find out that for the first 12 to 13 leaders of this Messianic groupment that was simply based in Jerusalem itself, that the first 12 to 13 leaders that he refers to as, he calls them that they were of the circumcision. In other words, they were all Jewish people. If you do a little research, and it doesn't take very much research, if you take the names of the first 4 or 5, which of course is James, which would have been his brother, and then Mark, I think, is the next one, and then you have a couple of others. It's really easy to really sit down and say, you can identify these people, and you can identify the fact that they are directly related, they're blood related to this Messianic figure. So this leadership is not voted in. Right. The leadership becomes a theocracy. It becomes something that's blood. In other words, it becomes not a theocracy. It becomes I'm saying a theocracy, but that's not right. It's a hierarchy. It becomes a kingdom thing. And that goes on for a number of years until Hadrian overthrows Jerusalem and runs all the Jews out. And that's the first time you have a non-Jewish person that's in charge of this group. And I think
that's when you find a church being established.
Exactly.
Because before that, as you know, like James says, they were gathering in the synagogues.
Right. Everybody's still going to the synagogue.